You know, I got a monkey, and his name is Jeff.
All right.
Take him out every now and then, show him around the place, and then when I'm done, stick him in his box, lock him up real nice and tight. Middle of the night, I can hear him go, ooh, 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 ooh. And just when he gets an inkling of an idea that I might let him go, kind of jiggle the little lock a little, maybe tinkle the old keys, and then I go, Jeff, you stupid fuck, I ain't letting you out. And I go back to sleep. Oh yes, the sleep of angels, accompanied by the sound of the hoot hoot hooting of a fucking chimp.
I don't know what this intro is.
Today we're talking about movies.
Okay.
So we're not gonna even bring up Jeff again.
Okay.
Hit that music!
Movies, music, story times, all kinds of shit for you. Everything goes in its house and out from
Now, I've been sick, and I just gotta say I've been blowing my nose with this dust collecting fucking rag that is only making the whole allergy, runny nose, bad sinuses thing worse.
Yep. I'm not lying. The fact that I can't breathe through this mask is also making my allergy sinus thing worse.
I almost did a face reveal there.
Yeah, you did.
By the
That's
by,
coming at 1,000,000 subs.
Yeah,
which will never happen.
when we get to 1,000,000 subs, we'll do the face reveal.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're actually going to talk not about Jeff, that belligerent fuck of a chimp.
I was wondering what those sounds were, by the way.
Oh, he's not happy to be in the box. But anyway, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a movie that I'm actually kind of interested to see what you think about it, because it was a movie that was received with, I wouldn't say a lukewarm reception. It was received somewhat, let's say a questionable reception. Let's say that. There was no concrete gusto for it as its predecessors. And we're talking about Edgar Wright's third entry into the famed Cornetto Trilogy. If you're not familiar with that, that's 3 movies that are literally linked by a fucking dessert.
And a director.
And a director and a creative team that includes Edgar Wright, Simon Pegg, and Nick Frost, mainly. The guys from space, basically. Anyway, they're big names in Britain, and they made quite the splash here in the USA with Shaun of the Dead, which kind of cemented their geek status forever. And subsequently, they released Hot Fuzz, which I gotta say, I love Shaun of the Dead. You know I do. It's one of the best zombie movies. It's also one of the best comedies out there, coincidentally. But I actually preferred Hot Fuzz. I thought it was a far better movie, even though Shaun of the Dead is an excellent movie. But I'm a big fan of Hot Fuzz.
And yeah, it was pretty well liked over here.
Yeah, and also was very well liked. And then they kind of went off on their own paths, sometimes working together, but not the whole threesome. That is until they made the last entry in the Cornetto Trilogy, which I hear now might not be the last entry, but for now it is, and that is The World's End. And this is kind of like these films are kind of like John Carpenter's End of the World trilogy, in the sense of a similar structure and thematic thrust, except that I guess Hot Fuzz is not that dire, in the sense that it's more of a lampooning.
But even then, it kind of goes into some weird.
Yeah, it does take some stranger paths to get to what it's getting to, but the ones that stick out as more along the lines are, of course, the ones that actually have an end of the world scenario, i.e., zombie apocalypse of Shaun of the Dead, and in The World's End, basically a alien invasion. And if you haven't seen the movie, well, you just got that ruined for you. But anyway.
It was all over the trailers.
Yeah, you pretty much figure it out from the trailers. Yeah. Now, this movie did come out simultaneously with a movie with a similar title called
This Is the End.
This Is the End, which
was, again, it was like another comedy troupe, basically, doing
Yeah,
their thing
your Judd Apatows and
with an end of the
Seth
world.
Rogen.
It literally came out like maybe a month apart, maybe a week
Yeah,
apart.
and part of that simultaneous almost release affected The World's End for sure. On top of that, it's a British movie with a cult following willing to come see it. It affected it for sure. And of course, This Is the End came out the winner basically, and even that didn't do that well.
Yeah.
But whatever. The point is, it kind of came and went. Now I didn't get to see this movie because I was locked up, and I finally got to see it courtesy of Uranus. Because we have this system where you pick a movie, I pick a movie, and we watch it. And this was your pick, and it was due time that we got
I've been
to
really
see.
wanting to see it for years. I actually downloaded it the year it came out, but freaking The Guardian sucks, and never wanted to see it. And I just kind of forgot until when I was looking through my shit. I was like, oh shit, this is a good choice.
So I'm interested to see what you think about this film as we talk about it, and in the process, we're going to decide which series of our conversations this goes into, because I don't really know where you stand on it. As I said, the reception to this was kind of mixed in the sense that it wasn't as enthusiastic a reception as it was for Shaun of the Dead or Hot Fuzz. What is your takeaway from this?
I really liked it, like quite a bit actually. Oh, all right.
I'm just letting that coast.
I like how you picked it up.
Yeah, I was just letting the silence coast for a while. Yeah, it's definitely a movie that is not going to ingratiate itself with a lot of people. I'll say that. Thankfully, I am one of the people that's gonna like it. So there's that. If you're a fan of these guys, you go into this movie very forgivingly. So it allows you to stay the long run until its most effective parts come into play. Now that makes it sound like the movie's ass. It's not. It's just not a very viewer-friendly movie to begin with. Reason being, our main character, I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, I'm just telling you why I think this way. Our main character, Gary, played by Simon Pegg, is designed to inherently be dislikable.
Yeah.
Or, I'm sorry, unlikable. And you're saddled with his presence the whole time. And you are either gonna ride along with that until the switch happens in the movie, and I think you'll agree with me. There's a point where this movie switches over gears. You're either gonna ride along with that, understanding that eventually this is gonna go somewhere, and or you're gonna give up on that and be like, "What is this?" That's what I think the majority of the audience would have thought. Now, if you're predisposed to be a fan of Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg, then
something's gonna happen.
you know something. And again, that makes it sound like nothing is happening, but that's not the case. A lot is happening. It's just coming through a very unlikable character. And the weird thing about the Gary character, Simon Pegg's character, is that he is, in a lot of ways, designed to be unlikable in every way. Successful people, like his friends in the movie, who have grown up to be successful, ambitious men, will dislike the character because he's the exact opposite of them. He has no ambition. He has no desires. He's not grown out of a certain stage. He's not matured, and he has severe problems. So they'll inherently dislike the character because he's not, he's not manned up. He's not ballsed up and done something with his life. People like us are going to dislike him to a degree because he's a reflection of us. He's that guy that's not moved on from a certain stage of his life, and he puts up the facade that he's okay with that, but in reality, he's not. Here's the thing. That turns out to be the genius of the movie. Because while it makes you put up with this unbearable fucking ass, eventually the movie turns out to be about a person that finds his place in the world. The irony of that being that the world had to come to an end for this person to find their place. So there's kind of like a bittersweetness to it, but in that very, ironic and British way to do it. Almost Monty Python levels of ludicrousness. For this guy's life to mean something, the world had to fucking end. For him to find his place, the world had to come in, because even though he was unambitious, he didn't subject himself to authority or society. It really was a reflection of him being a free spirit. And it even suggests that his drinking and all that stuff is society bearing down on him, causing him to be this way. Now, whether that is true or not about the character, it is clear by the end of the film that he has grown, and that's what you want out of a character.
Yeah, it's actually kind of a interesting character. I kind of liked him, not in that he's a likable character, but in that it is actually kind of a realistic depiction of depression.
Yeah, it really is.
And seeing what, I get lost. Seeing what I will feel in a character was interesting.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It does capture that enormously well, and again, that's what makes a character engaging, and
and they lay enough seeds from the beginning. He's in a group, in the beginning, talking to people, to make you say, okay, this is going somewhere.
Yeah.
It has a point.
The thing where it may have lost some people is that it does take its time to get there.
Yeah.
And you do have to put up with him. But it's all with a purpose. Putting up with him sweetens the pot at the end of the movie. Or as they progress. And putting up with him sweetens the pot for the other characters as well. And this was another thing that might have put off some people, is that they are playing against type, basically. Simon Pegg and Nick Frost are not exactly portrayed as buddies the whole movie.
Yeah.
There's actually a great rift between them. Again, it takes a while for you to get to that switch point where we get from the setup to the insanity that is these movies are prone to go into. And, if you hold on for that, then the whole picture will coalesce and become something. And anyway, would you say this deserves to be a cult classic, or would you say it doesn't?
I think it does.
I think so too, man. And I think it's people looking back on it, they will begin to appreciate it a lot more as the years go by. I understand maybe their initial disappointment in it.
It was. I mean, it's worth a note that it was critically lauded.
Yeah.
Much like pretty much all of Edgar Wright's movies, but at least over here, the audience didn't really see it.
I think for the most part, everybody. I think, I should say, most people think that it's a great movie. I just think they think it's the lesser of a great series of movies.
Even though it hasn't been said, I agree with you.
Yeah,
it has. That,
I think subconsciously, that's the understanding. These are a great series of movies. This is the lesser one. It's still great. It's just the lesser one. Do I necessarily think that? Not really. But yes, at the same time, I mean, how do you grade awesomeness through and through? You know what I'm saying? This is why I love the movie, though. It had a very Carpenter tone to it.
It did, actually.
Very Carpenter. And on top of being very... And if you're wondering what the fuck I mean by Carpenter, I mean John Carpenter, the man that brought us countless fucking hits, especially in the 80s, in the bulk of the 80s. But it had tones of The Thing. It had tones of They Live, Prince of Darkness. It just had a variety of these Carpenter-like influences and stylings. Even the music at times, when it wasn't soundtrack selections, had kind of that air to it.
Yeah.
On top of that,
like Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah, very Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is where I was going to, because I think the Carpenter influence movie it most took things from was influenced by, was Season of the Witch, aka Halloween 3, which coincidentally is very Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and to top it all off, was originally written by Nigel Neal, which was a British screenwriter who worked a lot on Doctor Who and famously did Quatermass and Quatermass Experiment, Quatermass in the Pit. And Nigel Neal's a legend in Britain and even here in the States. And he influenced Carpenter a lot. And I think, either intentionally or not, I don't know, I haven't really done a lot of research on it. As I said, just recently, I wanted to go in fresh to this movie, and when I finally saw it. And yeah, man, I think they took a lot of influence from that. And knowing Edgar Wright, it had to have been intentional. There has to be a reasoning behind it. And I got a lot of that substance from that. So just on that level alone, I was charmed by this movie. This being said, I don't know if you'll agree with me on this or not, but the humor in this movie was delivered in a very different style than the other previous movies. The other previous movies had a lot to do with how cleverly they dissected a particular genre in the in the vein of Hot Fuzz. That's where the majority of the humor came from, that particular thing. In Shaun of the Dead, again, this particular genre, and in both of them as well, we have clever, witty dialogue, line delivery, etc. Here, the brunt of the humor is almost pratfall style physical.
For a while.
There is humor in the interactions and the relationships of the people, but
it doesn't come until later.
Yeah, their relationships are so stressed that just becomes part of their character building. Whereas the majority of the initial humor, the vast part of the humor up until his friends, Gary's friends, begin to change their point of view and or change in a completely different way as per the movie, then it becomes different. But for a large portion of the movie, the humor hits on a physical level. And I gotta say, that's a risky line to walk for someone known to be a lot more clever. But when it did come, it was kind of like a relief in the sense that, one, it was very well done. And it didn't get to, and I mean, we love Three Stooges here, but it didn't get to that level.
It was basically just the fence gag from the other two movies done a couple times, and then like some other stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was actually like it worked.
Yeah, it was different approach to that particular thing, and there was much more concern with building a storyline for it. That being said, once the movie was over, the one thing that I thought the most, besides the heavy Carpenter feel and influence, and the Nigel Neal feel and influence, the thing that stuck out the most to me was, I want a movie about the end of the movie more than I want this movie now. Not to say that I'm disregarding the movie, but at the end of the movie was like, damn it, now I want that movie, which we're probably never going to get. But anyway, want to add anything?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, let's talk about the characters and the actors portraying them. Anybody that didn't hit for you, didn't strike. It's an ensemble cast.
Yeah.
And his friends, again, a lot of them are very portrayed as either unlikable in the case of Gary, or in the case of his friends, stuffy and too slotted into society's restraints to be relatable. So where do you stand on these portrayals, etc.?
I mean, everybody was good, considering they're playing different characters than they usually do. At least when talking about Simon Pegg and I forgot his name.
Nick Frost?
Yes. But I like how they kind of flipped it. I mean, we saw this in Hot Fuzz also, where they had them playing completely different characters from Shaun of the Dead. But they did it again here to an extreme, because at least Simon Pegg was always likable, and in this one they turned him into the dude where you're like, ooh. But as an audience member, you're like, he's supposed to be the likable one, right? But that's cool. I liked it because it ended up paying off, and again, it was actually a pretty good portrayal of someone like that. Everyone else is, yes, stuffy at first, but then they kind of loosen up as the movie goes along. I saw this movie as the drunker they got,
yeah,
the funner it got.
Yeah, and it really does play that very well.
And it's intentional, like completely intentional.
Yeah, that's what makes it, like I said, it's what kind of makes it genius at the end, that it ramps up to a purpose.
Yeah. And
the irony of it is the drunker they get, the more they realize that Gary's point of view is
like the
not...
more human they get, basically.
Yeah. And they realize that Gary's not at all what they perceive him to be, at least to some degree.
Yeah.
And that says something. And really, by the end of the movie, Gary's become something. And maybe, yes, he is still holding on to the past, but maybe that's what he's meant to do. And there's something very fulfilling about that, especially when you see Nick Frost's character relate the story to other people. And
it's also really depressing, though. Honestly.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like, at the end, I was like, that was a cool ending, but at the same time, pretty damn depressing.
Yeah, there is no happy tone to the fact that everybody fucking croaks, basically. In a sense, it's post-apocalyptic by the end, to say the least. But and then on top of that, on a personal level, things have changed. And yeah, again, the whole thing that Gary's holding onto his past, it creates for something visually, conceptually neat. But yeah, there is a undertone of sadness to that.
Yeah.
That he's still there, but he has found a purpose. And the irony of it is that he's the only one with a purpose now, other than to survive, for everybody else. So, yeah, man, it's a very interesting approach to character growth. And I think that's where the strength of the movie lies, the character growth. And that it focuses more on that than on the humor, though the humor is there. It was a very interesting
the humor,
departure.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with it being more pratfally. It's a lot more... They're talking about their lives, and there is amusing things being said, but it's never like or anything. It's more like how they kind of interact with Gary, and then it becomes more, more comedic as it goes along. But yeah, it is a very interesting structure that the movie went for.
Yeah, but everybody I think did a fantastic job in their roles. I didn't have any opposition to anyone.
It once again made a former Bond actor cool.
Yeah.
Apparently that's a thing with these movies now.
Let's talk about the effects in this movie. There's some pretty neat physical combination CGI effects in this, especially when finally we get the reveal of the whole town basically being involved in this alien invasion. And the way they display their non-hidden versions of themselves is these shining lights coming out of their eyes and mouths. Again, very reminiscent of something out of Doctor Who or something from the old British TV shows.
Or Snatchers.
Yeah, to a degree. The elements of all those paranoid films of the 70s and 80s, very present, but the effects I thought looked pretty damn cool. Also, these people are basically just robots, as they call them. They're basically just like plastic, kind of pseudo-ceramic robots.
Phobots.
Again, very reminiscent of something like The Stepford Wives, which again is another paranoia type of movie. But the effects are pretty neat, man. Basically them fighting with huge dolls,
basically,
that can break. I thought the effects were unique, very original.
It's really interesting because even though I knew what it was because the trailers completely ruined it. Not that you wouldn't expect a twist, but they pretty much just showed everything in the trailer. Once it happens in the restroom, it like splashes you with robo-gore, and it's like shocking for like a second. You're like, what the shit? This took a turn quick, even though it's been hinted at.
That's that switch moment that I was talking about. Because up to that point, it's that much more serious approach.
Yeah, with hints of something.
Yeah,
and then literally it's like a little brawl. The robo guy falls and slams his head on a urinal, and it blows up everywhere with super exaggerated like blood everywhere, or robo blood. And it's like, okay. And then from then on, it's just like the switch was turned completely, and you get really neat effects with I remember there being like a popping sound every time something would be. These babies like rip off super easy, so you get a lot of like interesting, like you said, interesting mix of practical and CG, which I actually thought was really cool looking.
Yeah, I thought the effects were pretty neat, and again, they struck familiar chords with the robo people from Season of the Witch. The whole town is under the sway of some bizarre supernatural plot. So on that end, it was awesome. Just on the plain visual end, I thought they worked wonderfully, and they're great for the physical comedy aspect of this, which I think, again, this is where that switch moment, it goes from a very serious approach, and then the comedy for the bulk of that portion of the second act is very physical. It's almost like beats. You know, they go back to talking about the mundane
Yeah.
to going to these insane acts of violence against these fucking robots, which creates a very interesting pace for the movie. I really enjoyed
I
that.
do like that I know this is going to go into the action, but that is our next talking point, so that's okay. Once the I guess it's revealed or whatever, and you have that little action scene in the shower, talking about prison too much lately, in the restroom, everybody's like suddenly a freaking wrestling
Yeah.
fiend, dropping elbow drops and shit. That being said, when watching this, I was like, especially the more actiony scenes, I was like, man, he should have directed that, man. This is some cool ass action.
Yeah, to move on to that, the action, that's where I say the humor gets much more physical, because they did hinge a lot of that on these hilarious fucking battles
Yeah.
that are frankly ridiculous as fuck, but that's why they work. They're so outrageous. You know, all of a sudden these fucking people are experts and shit, taking out these robo dudes in a variety of interesting and hilarious ways. It's a fucking great way to blend the action
It's, one of my favorite
with the humor.
One of my favorite moments was our boy Nick Frost grabbing 2 bar stools and freaking Hulk punching people's faces off and shit. Then of course we have the freaking wrestling moves he was busting on people.
I like that backbreaker moment.
Yeah, beating people with their own arms and legs and shit. Robots, I should say.
The action was a blast, man.
I also like how they made the robots like the weakest things ever. Like you touch on them and they fall apart. It was a very neat looking thing that went along with the ludicrous action very well.
Yeah, it's a fucking blast to see these guys go into battle, as it were. And really, it's like an unfair advantage because how weak these fucking robots are.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's a win through and through. The score in this thing is pretty fucking awesome, I gotta say. A combination of pop rock hits, mostly from across the pond. But what really stood out to me was the score sections, which again brought back those feelings of paranoia classics of the 80s, especially the Carpenterian ones. What'd you think of the score?
It was pretty good. Honestly, I don't remember it very well because it's been a couple days since we saw it, but I do remember enjoying it quite a bit. So
yeah, I thought it was pretty awesome. In fact, the soundtrack portion of it, you know, the song selections, kind of laid a little sneak peek ahead for what he would do with Baby Driver, which is pretty awesome. You know,
it does fit into.
They go hand in hand with what needs to be communicated about the scenes.
I will say awesome. I will agree with you on that. That once again, he proves that he's a pretty badass songster, as the term you coined in the previous video, when it comes to selecting tracks for his flicks.
Yeah.
So I do remember the soundtrack selections, and I remember being like, yeah, this is freaking badass. I don't remember the score very much, but I do remember liking it while I was watching it.
Now, about the visuals and the aesthetics of this particular film, if you're going to compare it to Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, visually it resembles Hot Fuzz a lot more than it does Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah.
Although I'd say it's a darker tone.
More blues.
More drab, more blue and blacks, and which goes along with kind of like the somber nature of the underlying
storyline.
Yeah, the storyline with Gary especially. So, and of course the idea that a whole town is being run rampant with invaders. So yeah, it definitely communicates kind of like a gloomy, depressing feel most of the time, which contrasts pretty neatly with the humor when it does come as it comes. So anyway, I think this is deserving of being a cult classic. So it should be. I think it should be a cult classic. I don't think it's ever gonna reach like everybody's accepting of its status, a la Casablanca or some shit. But it's definitely crafted for fans that love this shit.
I do think it's important to talk about more about the storyline the story arc, because again, like I said, it is a very good portrayal of a depressed person, basically, someone who's not willing to move on and shit. But it's also kind of like an not really anti-tech, but it does have we're too tech-heavy message, paralleled with the robots, basically. And in a weird, like when the world ends and we're freed from tech, people are kind of like, they find a new purpose to just live, which is something we're not really doing, which is a message in the film, which is not ever, I don't think it was ever heavy. It's not like you're an idiot for doing this, but it is a part of the movie.
I think it serves more as like a punctuation point to everything. Because they don't lay it in until the end.
Yeah.
So it comes off as a positive note versus something preachy. So yeah, very well done.
And then again, like at the end, I found it really depressing because it was like, oh man, despite the fact that he's found purpose, it's misguided purpose. He's still just doing the same thing.
But you see, this is where it kind of balances it. That's why I say that line is, and that's why I think it's like secretly genius, or not even secretly, it just is, in the sense that we don't need anything but that, technically speaking, to use that word that technically I shouldn't use, but anyway, that is the bare essence of humanity to survive, and therein we find richness in something.
No, that's what I'm saying when it comes to.
While it seems that he may be clinging to his past, and he is, that's when that was purest for him, you know. And somebody like Nick Frost's character, like the real one, not the robot version of him, is still kind of clinging to their past, which was our present, whereas Simon Pegg's character Gary has always kind of been free of that. He's lived out of time. And now he's the only one in place in a time where survival is everything. Whereas Nick Frost's character and any other survivors are out of place because they've conformed to society before. So now they're the odd man out and Gary's the odd man in. And the irony of it is that they're all kind of broken in a way.
Well, yeah.
So yeah, there's the sadness.
That's why it's so depressing. Because
there's the sadness, but there's also that solution.
There's also
resolution.
There's also a thing where it's kind of like an uplifting thing where everybody's still doing their thing or whatever, but they're kind of just free to, like, you know what I mean, like with his wife joining together, and they're like, in the scope of things, this ain't that bad, and people just kind of coming together again to form a little society. So there's kind of like an uplifting, despite the fact that they're falling back into those roles. There's still that, like, okay, at least now it's like a more freed existence, whereas he over here has always been free but is still clinging to the past. Despite the fact that he's still free, he's clinging to the past still. So it's kind of like, yeah, okay, there's positives in both ends, but it's still ultimately pretty depressing. Especially when it comes to like the depression aspect of his character, it's like that's what you do.
I think the subtext, on top of that, there was a subtext to that there is a middle ground.
Yeah, there's definitely a middle ground in the movie.
What he clings to at the end of the movie are robotic counterparts of his friends from his past. So the subtext there being possibly that there is a middle ground between us and technology, us and life, us and, you know.
But I think that is what it is. Yeah. It is a middle ground that the movie was trying to.
But consumption has overtaken everything, and you know, so there is a very positive message. It's just delivered in a kind of glum exterior.
But it very much is the middle ground that it's trying to show.
Yeah, definitely. But anyway, for this reason and many reasons, I think this is a definite classic. It's definitely underappreciated, I'll tell you that, at least in my opinion. Let's give this a final rating on a scale of 1 through 10. Again, in context with this type of movie, not next to fucking Treasure of Sierra Madre and shit.
Or Paddington.
Hit it. Or apparently fucking Paddington 2.
I'm not gonna lie, because a lot of the themes hit me pretty personal level, mainly with the Gary character. I really, really like this movie. I would probably go even as far as to say it's my second favorite of the three. Not to put anything against the other two, because it's freaking badass. And again, it's kind of unfair to compare them because they're so different. So I'm gonna give it a freaking strong as shit 9.5. Freaking thoroughly enjoyed it.
I'm gonna give it a solid 8. It is my least favorite of the Cornetto Trilogy. or apparently there's going to be 2 more, so who knows where I'll stand then. But again, that's like saying I don't like this ice cream because this ice cream is a little bit better. Ice cream rocks, unless it's mint chip, in which case, it makes me shit my insides out. But this is definitely not mint chip. It's one of the kick-ass flavors, and you can't choose one or the other. Or I guess it could be Cornetto.
This is the worst.
The point is, of the 3, it does stand at the last position for me. But I do greatly appreciate a much more subtler approach to certain elements, especially the story elements and the character growth. And I really loved, again, that ode to paranoid films of the past. That really fucking was spot on for me. And yes, again, the character does strike familiar chords that, for me it was more inspiring than it was just a reassertion of where I am in life versus, it was less defeating more than it was inspiring. So in that sense, I saw a more positive end to it. That being said, I mean, I do think it did take too much time to throw the switch on it, and that it was a risky endeavor to do that. But the thing is, it pays off, so that doesn't even matter in the long run. However, upon viewing it, it may deter some people from enjoying it fully.
Which, I'll kind of agree with that, in that for some people, the switch might come too late.
Yeah.
Personally, I enjoyed every bit of it.
And that's my...
But I can see someone being like...
Yeah, that's my concern in terms of watching a movie is I can enjoy a movie or not, depending on what it is, with no, problems whatsoever. But I'm also concerned with what somebody else might be thinking or somebody else might think of it. So in that sense, I can put myself in the shoes of another viewer and go, this could have been... But the thing is, it does pay off, and it pays off wonderfully. So it really is what kind of person is watching the movie.
It's kind of a middle ground thing, like the film.
Yeah, it really is. But anyway, this is a great movie. Check it out. If you haven't seen the rest of the Cornetto Trilogy, that's Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, check those out for sure as well.
Also, check out Paddington 2, because we hear it's
apparently
perfect.
It's fucking forged by God. Anyway, it's been having the good take, hit like, share, subscribe to those notification buttons, because we're fucking out of our minds
and out of ideas.
Oh yeah.
This music, story times, all kinds of shit for you. Anything goes inside the night, don't cup of corpulent juice. This music, story times, all kinds of shit for you. Anything goes